The huge room buzzed with voices from 100 different worlds. Lisa Grant sat in the small human section and watched the alien delegates talk among themselves. Their languages filled the air with clicks, hums, and sounds no human throat could make. The translation devices worked hard to turn it all into words she could understand. Lisa wore her best diplomatic uniform, dark blue with small silver stars on the collar. Next to her sat Captain Jake Morrison in his military dress uniform. His hand rested near his weapon. Even though weapons were not allowed in the council chambers, old habits were hard to break. On her other side, Dr. Amy Carter looked at her tablet, reading notes about each alien species present. The chamber was built like a huge bowl. The human section was tiny compared to the others. The Veltar had an entire curved wall to themselves, their crystal bodies catching and throwing light around the room. The snake-like Sarathi coiled in heated sections that kept them warm. The insect cricks clicked and buzzed in their hive-like area. High Consul Zethkara stood up. The Veltar leader was 12 feet tall and made of living crystal that changed colors with his moods. Right now he glowed a cool blue that meant he was being formal and distant. His voice boomed through the chamber without any need for microphones. "We gathered today to discuss the human request for advanced space technology," he said. The words came out clear through the translation system. "Many delegations have concerns about granting such tools to this young species." Lisa kept her face calm. She had expected this. Humans had only been part of the galactic community for 20 years. Most of the other species had been traveling between stars for thousands of years. To them, humans were babies playing with dangerous toys. Ambassador Velmoth of the Hegemony Coalition stood next. He was humanoid but twice as tall as any human, with skin like polished metal. His voice carried the weight of authority that came from ruling over 40 different worlds. "The humans have shown they are violent and unpredictable," he said. "Their history is full of wars and destruction. In just the past 500 years, they have fought 2 world wars and nearly destroyed their own planet several times." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. The Sarathi delegate, a creature that looked like a giant cobra with arms, raised her head high. "Their emotional control is poor," she hissed. "They make decisions based on anger and fear instead of logic. How can we trust them with technology that could destroy star systems?" More aliens spoke up. Each one had reasons why humans were not ready. They were too young, too aggressive, too unpredictable, too emotional. The list went on and on. Captain Morrison shifted in his seat. Lisa could feel his tension building. Jake had fought in 3 different conflicts before becoming her military advisor. He did not like being talked about as if he was not in the room. Dr. Carter kept taking notes. Amy was the smartest person Lisa knew. She had studied every species in the chamber and knew their histories better than they did themselves. Right now, she was probably thinking about how to counter their arguments with facts and data. The Crick's ambassador spoke in a series of rapid clicks and buzzes. The translation came through a moment later in a flat, mechanical voice. "Humans lack the patience required for proper technological development. They rush into new discoveries without considering long-term consequences. Their genetic modifications, nuclear weapons, and artificial intelligence programs all show dangerous recklessness." Lisa felt something cold settle in her chest. Not anger exactly, but something harder and more focused. She had heard these same arguments for months as she prepared for this meeting. Every species seemed to have the same opinion of humanity. "Perhaps," said another voice, "we should consider that humans are simply not evolved enough for the responsibilities we are discussing." This came from Ambassador Reltan of the Scientific Consortium. His people looked like walking trees with too many arms. They had been studying the galaxy for longer than human civilization had existed. Their brain structure shows they are still driven by primitive survival instincts. Reltan continued. "They have not developed past their base animal nature. Fear, aggression, territorial behavior, these control their actions more than rational thought." The chamber filled with agreeing sounds. Clicks from the Cricks, harmonic tones from the Veltar, and hissing from the Sarathi. Lisa looked around and saw the same expression on every alien face she could read. They saw humans as dangerous children who could not be trusted with adult tools. Ambassador Velmoth stood again. His metal skin reflected the chamber lights as he spoke. "Let us be honest about what we are discussing. The humans want weapons technology. They want faster ships, stronger shields, and more powerful energy systems. They say these are for exploration and defense. but their history shows they turn every tool into a weapon. He gestured toward the human section with one long arm. These are barely evolved primates who learned to make fire yesterday in galactic terms. They have not earned the right to technologies that took us millennia to develop safely. The chamber went quiet. Lisa felt every alien eye turn toward the human section. This was the moment she had been waiting for. The moment when they stopped talking about humans and started talking to them. She stood up slowly. Her chair made a soft sound as she pushed it back. Captain Morrison tensed, ready to follow her lead. Dr. Carter looked up from her tablet, finger hovering over the recording function. Lisa walked to the speaking platform in the center of the chamber. Her footsteps echoed in the sudden silence. The platform was designed for beings much larger than humans, but it adjusted automatically to her height. She reached into her uniform jacket and pulled out something small. Something that had traveled with her across the galaxy to this moment. She placed it carefully on the platform's surface where every being in the chamber could see it. It was a single tooth, old and yellowed with age. Small and unremarkable compared to the advanced technology surrounding them, but Lisa looked at it like it was the most important thing in the universe. The alien delegates leaned forward, confused. Some of them made sounds that their translators could not convert into words. A few actually laughed, thinking this was another example of human primitive thinking. Lisa let them look. Let them wonder. Let them dismiss what they were seeing as meaningless. Then she began to speak, and her voice carried to every corner of the great chamber. This belonged to my ancestor, a woman named Mary Stewart who lived 400 years ago. The laughter stopped. The tooth sat on the platform like a challenge. Lisa looked out at the confused faces of the alien delegates. Some still had expressions that might have been amusement. Others looked annoyed that she was wasting their time with what appeared to be garbage. High Consul Zeth Kara's crystal form shifted to a slightly darker blue. In Veltar body language, this meant he was becoming impatient. His voice carried a tone of polite dismissal. Ambassador Grant, we appreciate human customs, but perhaps you could explain the relevance of this artifact to our current discussion. Lisa picked up the tooth again. It was smooth from handling, worn down by centuries of being passed from one generation to the next. Her grandmother had given it to her mother. Her mother had given it to her, along with the story that came with it. Mary Stewart was 19 years old when the plague ships arrived, Lisa said. Her voice was steady and clear. The disease came from off-world traders who did not know they were carrying death in their cargo holds. Dr. Carter activated her tablet. Holographic displays appeared above the chamber, showing Earth's historical records from 400 years ago. The data was grim. Population charts showed massive drops in several coastal regions. Medical records described symptoms that killed quickly and spread faster. The plague killed 90% of Mary's village in 6 months, Lisa continued, but that was just the beginning. When people started dying, the supply chains broke down. No food deliveries, no medical supplies, no government help. The displays showed maps of Earth during those dark years. Red zones marked areas where central authority had collapsed. Black zones showed regions where no communication existed at all. The aliens in the chamber had access to their own historical databases. Several of them were probably checking Lisa's facts as she spoke. Mary lived in a fishing village called Port Haven. 3,000 people before the plague, less than 300 when winter came. Lisa held the tooth up so the chamber lights caught it. Mary had 3 children and a baby daughter. Her husband was already dead. Ambassador Velmoth made a dismissive gesture with his metal hand. Tragic, certainly, but every species has faced plagues and disasters. What makes this human story special? Lisa smiled, but there was no warmth in it. What makes it special is what happened next. The holographic displays changed. Now they showed climate data from Earth's plague years, temperature readings, crop failure reports, livestock death rates. Dr. Carter had compiled it all into a clear picture of cascading disaster. Winter came early that year. The crops had already failed because there were not enough people left to harvest them. The fishing boats sat empty because most of the fishermen were dead. And then the neighboring settlement started raiding for food. The Shrethi delegate raised her cobra-like head. Her species understood resource competition, survival of the strongest, natural selection. The weak die so the strong can live. That is what Mary's neighbors thought too, Lisa said. The survivors from the inland towns came to Port Haven with weapons. They demanded all the stored food. They said 300 people were too many to feed through winter anyway. Captain Morrison watched the alien faces carefully. He could see some of them beginning to understand where this story was heading. The cricks were clicking quietly among themselves. The Veltar consul's color had shifted to a cautious yellow. Mary organized the defense of Port Haven, Lisa continued. She was not a soldier or a leader. She was a school teacher who had never held a weapon before the plague came. But she convinced the survivors to fight instead of surrender. The displays now showed tactical maps of the siege of Port Haven. 300 defenders against nearly 1,000 raiders. The numbers were hopeless from any logical standpoint. The siege lasted 2 months. By the end, Port Haven had lost half its remaining population. Mary's oldest son died in the first week. Her middle daughter died from infected wounds in the 3rd week. Lisa paused, letting the weight of those losses settle in the chamber. But they held. Ambassador Relton's tree-like form rustled with what might have been approval. Admirable determination, but ultimately pointless if they all died anyway. They did not all die, Lisa said quietly. When the raiders finally gave up and left, there were 147 people still alive in Port Haven, including Mary and her baby daughter. She set the tooth back down on the platform. The small clicking sound it made seemed very loud in the quiet chamber, but winter was just beginning. 147 people. No crops, no livestock, no trade, no help coming. Lisa looked around the chamber, meeting as many alien eyes as she could. Mary had to make a choice. The chamber was completely silent now. Even the background hum of the life support systems seemed to have quieted. The first child died of starvation in the 3rd week of winter. A 5-year-old boy named Tommy, whose parents had died in the siege. Lisa's voice never wavered, but something cold had entered it. Mary made dinner that night. She told everyone they would have meat. Several alien delegates shifted uncomfortably. The implications were becoming clear. She never told them what kind of meat it was. She just said it was meat, and everyone was hungry enough not to ask questions. Lisa picked up the tooth again. This came out of Mary's mouth 2 days later. She pulled it out herself with a pair of rusty pliers. High Consul Zethkara's crystal form had gone completely dark blue, almost black. Why would she do such a thing? Lisa looked directly at him. Because a black market doctor was trading antibiotics for anything valuable. And Mary's baby daughter had developed an infection that would have killed her without medicine. The holographic displays showed medical records from that winter. Infant mortality rates, infection statistics, survival data. The numbers painted a picture of desperation that few species in the chamber had ever experienced. Mary pulled out her own tooth to trade for medicine to save her child, Lisa said. That is what humans do when everything else fails. We hurt ourselves to save each other. The chamber remained silent for a long moment. Then Ambassador Velmoth spoke, his metal voice carrying a note of confusion. But surely this was madness. Self-destruction in the face of inevitable defeat. Lisa smiled again, and this time there was warmth in it, but also something that made several aliens lean back in their seats. That is what you do not understand about humans yet, she said. For us, there is no such thing as inevitable defeat. Lisa held the tooth between her thumb and finger, turning it slowly in the chamber's light. The alien delegates watched with expressions ranging from confusion to horror. She could see them trying to understand the logic behind Mary's choice and failing. The black market doctor was a man named Carl Webb, Lisa continued. He had been a veterinarian before the plague, but when the hospitals collapsed, he became the only medical help for 300 miles. He was not a good man, but he was the only option Mary had. Dr. Carter's holographic displays shifted to show more historical data, pictures of the makeshift medical stations that had sprung up during the plague years, records of the desperate trades people made for basic medicine. The aliens could see the documentation, but Lisa could tell they still did not really understand. Carl Webb traded medicine for anything valuable. Jewelry, electronics, precious metals, artwork, anything he could later sell to traders from other regions. Lisa paused, looking directly at the Veltar consul. But in a collapsed economy, most valuable things lose their value quickly. Ambassador Velmoth's metal face showed no expression, but his voice carried skepticism. A single tooth would have little trade value. This story makes no logical sense. You are thinking like a rational being from an advanced civilization, Lisa said. Carl Webb was thinking like a desperate human in a dying world. He did not want the tooth because it was valuable. He wanted it because of what it represented. Captain Morrison leaned forward slightly. He had heard this story before, but it still affected him every time Lisa told it. The aliens around the chamber were beginning to look uncomfortable, though most of them could not yet understand why. Carl Webb collected teeth, Lisa said simply. Human teeth pulled by the owners themselves. He kept them in glass jars arranged on shelves in his clinic. Each jar was labeled with a name and a date. The Crick's ambassador made a rapid series of clicks that the translator converted to words. What possible purpose could such a collection serve? Lisa smiled, but it was not a pleasant expression. Proof. Carl Webb wanted proof that humans would do absolutely anything to protect their families. He collected those teeth as evidence of something he found both fascinating and terrifying. She held Mary's tooth up again, and several alien delegates actually pulled back from their viewing screens. Mary did not just walk into his clinic and hand over the tooth. She had to prove she had pulled it out herself. Carl Webb made everyone demonstrate their commitment before he would trade with them. Lisa's voice grew quieter but somehow more intense. Mary sat in a wooden chair in his clinic and used rusty pliers to remove this tooth from her own mouth while he watched. The chamber had gone dead silent. Even the life support system seemed to have stopped humming. She did not cry out. She did not ask for pain medication. She gripped the arms of that chair and pulled out her own tooth because that was what it took to save her daughter. Lisa placed the tooth back on the platform with infinite care, and Carl Webb gave her the antibiotics because he knew he was seeing something that no other species in the galaxy possessed. High Consul Zethkara's crystal form was now so dark it was almost black. When he spoke, his voice carried a note that the translators labeled as profound unease. This behavior is not rational. The pain, the permanent damage, the risk of infection from the removal itself. Any logical analysis would show that the costs outweighed the potential benefits. That is exactly the point, Lisa said. Mary did not do a logical analysis. She did not calculate costs and benefits. She saw her daughter dying and did whatever it took to save her regardless of the cost to herself. Dr. Carter's displays now showed comparative data from other species' historical records, survival rates during catastrophic events, population recovery times, extinction probabilities. The human data stood out starkly from all the rest. Mary's daughter survived, Lisa continued. The antibiotics worked. But that was just the beginning of that winter. Over the next 4 months, Mary led the survivors of Port Haven through the darkest period in their history. Ambassador Reltan's tree-like form rustled with what might have been curiosity. Led them how? What could one person do in such circumstances? Everything that needed to be done, Lisa replied. Mary organized hunting parties to find food. She rationed what little they had to make it last. She assigned work duties and settled disputes. She made the hard decisions that kept people alive when there was no good reason for any of them to still be breathing. The holographic displays showed the survival statistics from Port Haven compared to other settlements during the same period. Port Haven's numbers were extraordinary, not just in terms of who lived, but in terms of how they organized themselves and maintained hope. Mary convinced people to keep fighting when fighting made no sense, Lisa said. She made them believe that spring would come and things would get better, even when all the evidence said they would not. The Israthi delegate raised her cobra-like head again. Hope is not a survival strategy. Emotions do not change objective reality. Lisa looked directly at her. You are wrong. Hope is the most powerful survival strategy humans have ever developed. It is what makes us refuse to quit when quitting is the logical choice. She gestured toward the holographic displays showing Port Haven's survival rate when spring finally came and relief efforts reached the coastal regions. Mary had kept 12 people alive through a winter that should have killed everyone. 3 of them were children under the age of 5. Captain Morrison watched the alien faces around the chamber. Some were beginning to show signs of what humans would recognize as fear. Not fear of violence or aggression, but something deeper and more disturbing. But here's the part of the story that Carl Webb found most fascinating, Lisa continued. Mary did not pull out just 1 tooth that winter. She pulled out 4 more over the course of those 4 months, trading each one for medicine or supplies that kept other people alive. The chamber erupted in shocked sounds from multiple species, clicks, hisses, harmonic tones, and noises that the translators could not convert into words. By spring, Mary Stewart was missing 5 teeth from the left side of her mouth, Lisa said over the noise. She had permanent nerve damage in her jaw. She could barely eat solid food for the rest of her life, but she had saved 12 people, including 3 children who grew up and had families of their own. High Consul Zethkara's voice was barely above a whisper when he spoke. "Why are you telling us this story, Ambassador Grant?" Lisa picked up the tooth one more time, holding it so every being in the chamber could see it clearly. "Because you asked why humans deserve advanced technology. You questioned our emotional stability and our violent tendencies." She paused, meeting the eyes of every alien delegate she could see. "I am not here to defend those things. I am here to explain what you are actually afraid of." The chamber fell silent again, waiting for her to continue. "You are afraid of what Mary Stuart represents, a species that will mutilate themselves before they will let their children die." The chamber exploded into angry sounds. Multiple alien delegates stood up at once, their voices overlapping in a chaos of protests and denials. The Hegemony Coalition ambassador's metal skin flashed with bright warning colors. The Crix delegation clicked so rapidly that their translators could not keep up. Even the usually calm Veltar consul blazed with indignant light. "How dare you suggest that advanced civilizations fear primitive humans?" Ambassador Velmoth's voice boomed over the others. "Your species has barely left its home system. You have no achievements worthy of fear or respect." The Sarathi delegate reared up to her full height, her cobra-like hood spreading wide. "This is insulting beyond measure. We have conquered star systems while your people were still discovering fire." Lisa waited for the protests to die down. She stood calmly at the platform, one hand resting near Mary's tooth, watching the alien delegates with the same expression her ancestor might have worn while facing down the raiders at Port Haven. Captain Morrison had his hand on his weapon again, though he knew it would be useless against beings who could destroy entire planets. Dr. Carter was recording everything, her fingers flying over her tablet as she documented each species' reaction. When the chamber finally quieted, Lisa spoke again. Her voice was still calm, but it carried an edge that made several aliens step back from their microphones. "You are right about our achievements," she said. "Humans have not conquered star systems or built galactic empires. We have not mastered space and time or unlocked the secrets of the universe." She picked up the tooth and held it where everyone could see it. "But we have done something that terrifies every comfortable civilization in this galaxy." High Consul Zethkara's crystal form was now cycling through colors so rapidly that Dr. Carter could not identify them all. "What could humans possibly have done that would concern us? We have proven that intelligence and technology are not the only paths to survival," Lisa replied. "Every species in this chamber achieved greatness through logic, planning, and rational decision-making. You built your civilizations on the foundation of reasonable choices and calculated risks." She gestured around the chamber at the assembled alien delegations. "You look at human history and see chaos, wars, disasters, near extinctions, and recoveries that should have been impossible. You see a species that makes terrible decisions and somehow survives anyway." Lisa's voice grew stronger. "That terrifies you because it suggests that all your careful planning and logical thinking might not be as important as you believe." Ambassador Reltan's tree-like form rustled with agitation. "Survival through illogical behavior is not sustainable. Eventually, reality defeats wishful thinking, is it?" Lisa asked. Dr. Carter's holographic displays changed to show comparative survival data from across the galaxy. "Your species, the Scientific Consortium, faced a similar plague 6,000 years ago. Population dropped by 40%. Recovery took 8 centuries. The displays shifted to show Sarathi history. Your people suffered ecological collapse on 3 worlds. Each time you calculated acceptable losses and abandoned billions of your own kind to save the rest." More data flowed across the displays. Veltar evacuation protocols, Crix hive culling practices, Hegemony Coalition resource allocation during disasters. Every species had faced extinction-level events. Every species had made rational choices about who would live and who would die. "There is nothing wrong with logical decision-making," Lisa continued. "Your species survived and thrived because you could accept losses and move forward. You could sacrifice some to save others." She held up Mary's tooth again. "But humans do not work that way." Captain Morrison watched the alien faces carefully. Some were beginning to show signs of understanding. Others looked more confused than ever. "When Mary Stuart's village was dying, the logical choice was surrender," Lisa said. "When the raiders came with superior numbers, the logical choice was to give them the food and accept death. When winter came with no supplies, the logical choice was to let the weakest die first to save resources for the strong." The chamber was completely silent now. Every alien delegate was listening with the focused attention of beings who sensed they were hearing something important. Mary did not make logical choices. She fought impossible battles, made unsustainable sacrifices, and refused to accept losses that any rational being would consider inevitable. Lisa's voice grew quieter, but somehow more intense, and she won. High Consul Zethkara's color had stabilized to a deep purple that Dr. Carter recognized as profound contemplation. But such behavior cannot be replicated on a species-wide scale. Individual heroics do not translate to civilizational success. Lisa smiled, and this time the expression was genuinely warm. That is where you are wrong. Mary Stuart was not unique among humans. She was typical. Dr. Carter's displays now showed statistical analysis of human behavior during crisis situations, disaster response rates, sacrifice patterns, survival statistics from hundreds of catastrophic events throughout human history. When humans face extinction, we do not calculate acceptable losses, Lisa said. We find ways to save everyone. When we face impossible odds, we do not surrender. We find impossible solutions. She paused, looking around the chamber. When we face choices between logical self-preservation and illogical self-sacrifice, we choose sacrifice every time. Ambassador Velmoth made a dismissive gesture. Emotional responses to crisis situations prove nothing about overall species capability. Do they not? Lisa asked. The displays changed again, showing human technological development rates, population recovery times, and expansion patterns. Humans went from ground-bound civilization to interstellar travel in less than 2 centuries. Your species took 2 millennia. The Crix ambassador clicked rapidly. Speed of development is not the same as quality of development. Rushing leads to mistakes and catastrophic failures. You are right, Lisa agreed. Human development has been messy and dangerous. We have made terrible mistakes and nearly destroyed ourselves multiple times. She held up the tooth again. But we are still here. Still growing. Still refusing to quit. Dr. Carter's displays now showed population projections, industrial capacity estimates, and technological development curves. The human numbers stood out starkly from every other species in the database. You want to know what makes humans dangerous? Lisa continued. It is not our weapons or our ships or our technology. It is that we are the species that will pull out our own teeth before we let our children die. She placed the tooth carefully back on the platform. Every human who reaches for the stars carries that same genetic memory, the absolute refusal to accept defeat, even when defeat is the only logical option. Lisa looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of every alien delegate she could see. You can deny us advanced technology. You can limit our expansion. You can try to contain us to our corner of the galaxy. The chamber waited, sensing that she was building toward something important. But understand what you are really doing, Lisa said quietly. You are telling a species that survived the plague years, the climate wars, and the near extinction of our homeworld that we are not allowed to grow. The implications hung in the air like a challenge that every being in the chamber could feel. The silence in the chamber was complete. Lisa could hear her own heartbeat in the stillness that followed her words. Every alien delegate sat frozen, as if they were processing implications too large for immediate understanding. High Consul Zethkara's crystal form had turned a deep purple that Dr. Carter recognized as the Veltar equivalent of deep thought. His voice, when he finally spoke, carried none of its earlier authority. You are suggesting that human irrationality is actually a form of strength. I am suggesting that what you call irrationality might be the most powerful survival trait any species has ever developed, Lisa replied. She picked up Mary's tooth one last time, holding it so the chamber lights made it seem to glow. You see chaos and emotion where we see determination and love. Captain Morrison shifted slightly in his seat. He could see the change happening in the alien delegates. The anger and dismissal were fading, replaced by something that looked almost like fear. Not fear of human weapons or aggression, but fear of something they could not understand or predict. Mary Stuart pulled out her own tooth to save one baby, Lisa continued. That baby grew up, had children of her own, and passed down the story. 400 years later, her descendant stands before you as humanity's voice among the stars. Dr. Carter's displays showed the family tree connecting Mary Stuart to Lisa Grant. 15 generations of humans who had survived wars, plagues, disasters, and near extinctions. Each generation had faced their own impossible choices and somehow found ways to keep going. Every human carries that same memory in their genes, Lisa said. The knowledge that our ancestors chose pain over surrender, sacrifice over safety, hope over logic. She looked around the chamber at faces that were beginning to show understanding. You want to know what makes us dangerous? It is not our technology or our numbers. It is that we have never learned how to quit. Ambassador Velmoth's metal features were completely still. When he spoke, his voice was quieter than it had been all day. But surely there must be limits. Even humans cannot defy physics or mathematics. Lisa smiled, and this time the expression was almost gentle. You are thinking about this wrong. We do not defy physics or mathematics. We just refuse to accept that they define what is possible. The displays changed to show human achievements that had been considered impossible by the scientific communities of their time. Flight, space travel, genetic medicine, artificial intelligence, faster-than-light communication. Each breakthrough had come from humans who refused to accept the limitations that experts told them were absolute. When our scientists said heavier-than-air flight was impossible, humans built airplanes, Lisa said. When physicists said faster-than-light travel violated fundamental laws, humans found ways around those laws. When biologists said human lifespan could not be extended past certain limits, humans extended it anyway. The Crix ambassador made a series of rapid clicks, but many of those achievements came at terrible costs. Human technological development has been wasteful and dangerous. You are absolutely right, Lisa agreed. Human progress has been messy, expensive, and often catastrophic. We have made mistakes that more careful species would never make. She paused, looking directly at the Crix delegation. But we made progress that more careful species could never achieve. High Consul Zethkara's color shifted to a lighter purple. You are asking us to trust a species that prioritizes results over safety. No, Lisa said firmly. I am asking you to understand what you are really afraid of. She held up Mary's tooth one final time. You are afraid of a species that will do whatever it takes to protect what we love. The chamber was silent again, but it was a different kind of silence. Not the silence of confusion or anger, but the silence of beings who were finally beginning to understand something they had missed. Mary Stuart did not pull out her tooth to be heroic or to prove a point, Lisa continued. She did it because her daughter needed medicine, and that was the price. It was not brave or noble or inspiring. It was just necessary. Dr. Carter's displays now showed current human population projections, expansion plans, and resource development programs. The numbers were staggering compared to what humans had possessed just 50 years earlier. You can deny us advanced technology, Lisa said quietly. You can limit our access to galactic trade routes. You can refuse to share your scientific knowledge. She placed the tooth carefully in her pocket. But you cannot change what we are. Captain Morrison watched the alien delegates, seeing the moment when they finally understood the choice they were really making. Not whether to trust humans with advanced technology, but whether to have humans as allies or as competitors developing their own solutions. Mary Stuart had one baby to save, Lisa said. Modern humans have billions. She looked around the chamber one final time. Imagine what we will pull out to save them all. The implications hung in the air like a challenge that could not be ignored. High Consul Zethkara was the first to speak, his voice carrying the weight of a decision that would reshape galactic politics. The Council will recess for deliberation, he announced. All delegations are advised to reconsider their positions on human integration into galactic society. As the chamber began to empty, alien delegates filed out in small groups, deep in urgent conversation. The Veltar were flashing rapid color changes that indicated heated debate. The Asrathi moved in tight coils, their body language suggesting serious concern. Even the usually confident Hegemony Coalition representatives seemed subdued. Captain Morrison leaned over to Lisa as they gathered their materials. Think it worked? Lisa touched her pocket where Mary's tooth rested safely. Mary did not pull out that tooth to negotiate or to make threats. She did it because it was necessary. She watched the last of the alien delegations file out, many of them casting worried glances back at the human section. Sometimes the galaxy needs to remember what necessity looks like. Dr. Carter was still taking notes, documenting the reactions and responses of each species. The statistical models suggest a 73% probability of favorable outcome, she said without looking up from her tablet. Statistics do not matter, Lisa replied. We are humans. We will find a way to succeed regardless of the odds. 3 days later, the Galactic Council reconvened. High Consul Zethkara's announcement was brief and unprecedented. Humanity would receive not just the advanced technology they had requested, but an invitation to join the inner circle of galactic governance. Not as junior members earning their way up, but as equals with full voting rights and access to the highest levels of galactic science and technology. The vote was unanimous. That night, alone in her quarters aboard the human diplomatic ship, Ambassador Lisa Grant placed Mary Stewart's tooth in a small display case next to her window. Outside, the stars of the galactic core sparkled with the light of 1,000 civilizations that had finally learned to respect the species that refused to surrender. The tooth would travel with her to every diplomatic meeting, every first contact, every negotiation that would shape humanity's future among the stars. Not as a threat or a symbol of human savagery, but as a reminder of the most important truth about her species. When everything else failed, when logic and reason and careful planning reached their limits, humans would find another way. They would sacrifice anything, endure any pain, and refuse any surrender that stood between them and the survival of those they loved. The galaxy had finally learned what Mary Stewart knew 400 years ago. Sometimes the smallest sacrifices carry the weight of entire civilizations, and sometimes the most powerful force in the universe is simply refusing to quit.